Hello everybody, welcome back to Bentley House. I'm Ara and today we are working in the prompt book again. We are on prompt number 6, but we are also going to be reviewing some Arteza supplies. Now I've reviewed Arteza previously. I reviewed some of their paints and they really liked my review, and so they wanted me to try out some more supplies. And what's exciting is this time they let me choose from their entire website a few things to test out, and I know several of you use Polymer Clay. So I decided to test out their Polymer Clay. They call it oven baked clay, and I will leave links to these things in the description box below if you like my review and want to try them out for yourself. And I think they also gave me a coupon code for you to use, but they are not sponsoring me. They did send me these products for free, but I am not sponsored, so they know that I am going to give my honest review of these supplies so that you guys can make a decision for yourself. So this is the oven baked clay. It is 42 colors, and on the website it is $28.99, I believe, and each clay bar is 28 grams, and so if you divide all of that out, it is about 2.4 cents per gram. So you can kind of decide compared to the clay you're currently buying if that's a good deal for you or not. The kit itself comes with some jewelry. It comes with some of its own sculpting tools. They have some interesting ones I've never really seen before, with some different textures. They do seem like a little bendy, but they are plastic. I do use them in this video, and they seem to work fine. So look at all these colors. They're actually long, thin bricks of clay, so it's kind of hard to just eyeball whether this is just a little bit or a lot because it's a weird shape. I did go ahead and open it up, and I touched the clay because I'm used to Sculpey 3 and it's very soft, and this was definitely not as soft, so this will be different for me to try and use. They have so many different colors. I pulled out some of the similar ones and they are different. So if you're one that doesn't like to paint your clay, this could be an option of just having multiple different colors. This is the bottom part of the container. It's got a few more pastel type colors in it, and the kit is pretty cool that it came with, the little plastic container thing, but the little dividers aren't, they're really flimsy. It did come with black and white, and I did notice that there is like a second white color, but one of them is off-white, but it would probably still work. And there are a couple metallics. There's a gold metallic and a bronze metallic, which I will be using today because I like metallic clays, but I did notice that there's no silver metallic. These are just plain gray colors. Now the other thing they sent me were these sculpting tools, and I thought this would go along nicely with the clay, obviously. One thing I did notice about this kit is that some of these sculpting tools are more for pottery type clay and not necessarily for polymer clay. Like this piece here is for cutting big chunks of clay. It's one of those wires on the sticks, so I can't really review those pieces. This is like a blade, so this I can use for polymer clay because I can cut the clay bits apart, and that actually ends up being one of my favorite tools, and I'll tell you why. But these other pieces are pretty normal type polymer clay pieces that you would find at the craft store. A lot of these I do own. I don't mind having more of them because sometimes I do give them away to students, let people borrow them. It does have this little saw, which I've never seen before. I don't actually end up using it. Here's another pottery sculpting tool, which I can't review because it's not really for polymer clay. They do have some ball styluses in there, which are good and always helpful. They have this sponge who's had apparently a hard life, and this is again a pottery tool, so I won't be using it. It's for like wetting down the clay, but I can save that. It seems like a nice sponge, so I can save that for something else. Now my idea today is that I will be sculpting whatever out of this clay, and only with the clay and only with the tools. So that is my challenge to myself. Now, some of you have asked me for a list of all the prompts, so I am putting that in the description box below. Remember, I go in a random order, and so I put an X next to the ones I've already done, but if you want to make a book like this for yourself, you now have all the prompts and you can do that. So I'm going to open this book, and I am going to pick something at random, and whatever it is, I have to make out of polymer clay. So we are working on treasure, which is actually perfect. I promise I just randomly turned to this. The other side is science, but I am going to go with treasure today. So prompt number 6 is going to be treasure, and let's get started. So you may remember a few videos ago where I raced my 3D printer and I handmade a chest and the 3D printer printed a chest. Well, I thought for today, since we're doing treasure, we could fill the 3D printed chest with treasure using the polymer clay. So I'm going to go ahead, go through my colors, pull out all of them that kind of I would think would be in a treasure chest, and I'm pulling out jewel tones and metallics and black and white, even though I don't actually end up using a lot of the black and white. I'm also going to have my tools nearby. Now, the one thing that is not Arteza that I am using is this mat. It is a Sculpting work and bake clay mat, and I love this thing because I can work straight on top of it and stick it into the oven, so I always put that down when I'm working with polymer clay. Now, I have this piece also from a recent video where I made an ice cube mold, and so I decided to go ahead and reuse it so I'm not wasting clay as the center of what is going to be my block that's going inside of the chest. Now, you could use aluminum foil. This just helps save clay. Once I pulled the clay out, it really had an oily substance on the face of it, and I know that polymer clay is made with oils, so it may be that the oils just come to the surface if it's sitting for a certain amount of time. So once I had kneaded it for a while, I did feel like the oils kind of went back into the clay, but it did start out very oily, and it is a bit tough to get started. It does say on the front of the package, knead until soft, and that's like number 2, and I did knead it and it became a little bit more workable, but it is a tougher clay to work with. It is definitely not as soft as Sculpting 3, which is what I prefer, but it does have its benefits, which I will tell you about in a bit. But just so you know, if you have a hard time with really hard clay, this one is a tough one. I decided to go ahead and mix those 2 colors of yellow together, and the best way I found to do that was to use that little blade tool, chop it all up, and mush it together, and then roll it out. Now I'm going to take this pre-baked block from another video and I'm going to wrap it in the yellow. This is going to create a base inside of the treasure chest that is going to help me not have to just fill it with hundreds of coins. It's going to be a fake coin base because I want this treasure chest to be full of coins. So I'm just wrapping that, and I realized it was a little bit tall and I want to chop off the top of it. So this is my first real test of this little blade, and it really does a good job without being super sharp. I think maybe this kit could be good for children because it does have this blade tool in it, but it's not a true blade that would cut your fingers. It's just a little bit dull. So now I'm going to take this other texturing tool, and I don't want to have just a flat top on this fake coin base, and so I'm just using different tools to texture it. So if you do end up seeing the base through some of the coins that I sprinkle on top, it is textured and not just flat. This is the metallic gold clay, and I'm going to cut off a chunk of that because I'm going to start creating my coins that are going to go on top of the base. And to do this, I'm just going to roll a snake of clay, and I found this tool that is the closest thing to like an X-Acto blade. It's still not super sharp, so if you're looking at something for a kid's toolbox, this might be a good one. But what I did was I used it to pull off little pieces, I rolled them into balls, and then squished them onto the clay to make it look like little gold coins sitting on top. I'm not going to do this all over the top because this takes a while, but I did want a little bit of it in there. Now once I have that on there, I want to go ahead and bake this base because everything's going to sit on top of it. I'm following the directions exactly, and I also baked 2 uncut rolls of clay as well to create more coins. Now once I took it out, it seemed a little bit bigger than it was when I first started, so I'm not sure I checked it again before I put it in the oven, so I don't know if that was my fault or if the clay changed size. So you might just keep that in mind if you do decide to purchase this clay. It may grow a little bit in the oven. Now you might have seen that I did use one of my other polymer clay blades to cut off that piece. That's because I needed something super sharp to get a straight cut so that it could fit back into the chest. Now I do take this Arteza tool that kind of has a blade on it. It would not cut through this clay, and so I do end up having to use my X-Acto knife to cut through it, but I'm not really complaining because this is when I realized that this clay is very tough, and that can be a good thing. While I do like the softness of Sculpting 3, and as you can see it's cutting really nice little coins, and so I was happy with the way those were turning out. But with Sculpting 3, I do feel like it can be brittle and it can break easily, and so it scares me to make very thin pieces. But this does not break very easily. As you can see, I'm putting a lot of pressure. Once I'm putting a ton of pressure, it turns white like it's about to break, but it doesn't. And then I was trying to take this tool and push down with all my might to get it to go through, and it just would not go through the snake of clay. I baked it according to package instructions, and it just became really tough. So if you're looking for a tough clay, and I did it with this one too because sometimes metallics are different than regular colors, but the gray was tough as well. It broke a little bit sooner than the gold did, but this is some tough clay. So you know, it does have its benefits, even though it can be a little bit tough to work with in the beginning. That toughness stays once you bake it. So if you need something strong, this could be something to consider. Now I'm just going to cut a bunch of little coins from these snakes because it's going to be basically like confetti that I sprinkle on top of the treasure box. I'm also going to use some gray and some of the jewel tones to create some more gray coins. Now I don't have silver, like I said, but you know, sometimes coins don't have to be metallic, they can be a flat gray. And I'm also going to roll snakes of these jewel tones, and I'm going to cut little pieces off to try and make gems. And to do this, I'm just going to roll them in my fingers until I have a little ball, and then after I bake it, I'm going to cut them in half so that I can, and then I'm going to cut the sides to create kind of a jewel shape. But to start out, I'm just going to bake them as circles. I did want to make a goblet, like a silvery goblet. It's going to look more like a pewter goblet because we don't have the metallic. So I looked through the tools and I found one that was like a ball shape, and it wasn't deep enough, so I grabbed this other tool that had like a rubber end to it, and I started shaping this gray clay over the end of the tool to make a goblet type cup. Once I had the shape that I liked, I took my X-Acto and started cutting off the excess so that I would have a flat top, and then I just carefully removed it from the tool, and that is going to be the bowl part of my goblet. To make the bottom of the goblet, I just took some more of that gray and I pressed it flat onto the baking sheet, which is why I like this baking sheet, because I don't have to pry it off. I can just put it straight into the oven. I'm going to use this other textured tool to create just a little bit of interest on the base of the goblet. And then I'm also going to make a little snake of clay that's going to be the stand that goes between the base and the bowl. And then I also decided to add a little bit of texture on the bowl of the goblet as well. And I'm sorry I'm so zoomed out for these, but it's really just a few simple shapes, and then after I bake them, they go together pretty easily. All I do is take some gel super glue, add a tiny dot to the top of the base, and then I can add that gray snake of clay on top to create the stem of the goblet. and then put another dot of glue on top of the stem, and then add the bowl, and then just let it sit and dry for a good amount of time, and then we have a goblet. It's not the best shaped goblet, but it will work for our little treasure box. Now that I have everything baked, I am going to cut these balls of the jewel tones in half, and I will zoom in for you for this. So once I cut it in half, I'm going to start shaping the outside to be more of a multifaceted type shape, and so that means it's going to have lots of flat pieces cut, very much like most gemstones. You don't really see a lot of gemstones that are rounded, so I'm going to cut them so that they have flat edges, and they're just going to be like little jewels sitting on top of the coins once I get to that point. And I did them out of all sorts of colors. So I have 3 different color of the coins. I have gold, I have flat gray, and then I went ahead and made a little bit of the bronze color into a snake of clay and then cut those. And I'm just going to mix them together because, like I said before, this is going to be kind of like a confetti effect where I just sprinkle it on top, and wherever the glue is, it will stick. Onto the base piece again, I decided I wanted to just put a little bit of shading onto it, because if you did end up seeing it through the coins on top, I didn't know how much you would be able to see. I did want it to look darker, and so I added this black, and it just started looking like a moldy piece of cheese. It looks really not great, but the good thing is we know that we're going to be covering it up with treasure. But you are eyewitness to the ugliest thing I've probably ever made, is this little block here. Moving on. Now we're going to make kind of the eye-catching piece that goes on top of the treasure. It's going to be this little crown. And so I mixed the gold with a little bit of white because I kind of wanted a lighter gold tone, but I don't think it really mattered in the end. You couldn't really tell that it was lighter. But I'm using this little blade tool. Again, it works really well even though it's dull. I tend to be a little bit accident prone when it comes to blades and sharp things. So having something that's not super sharp, I really like. It's not super sharp, but it works. Now, it's not the sturdiest piece of metal. Like if I wanted to bend it, I could, but I think it's probably going to be one of those tools that goes into my everyday use box. I really liked it. So now that we have a little crown strip cut, I'm going to add some of our baked gemstones in, and then I'm going to take my X-Acto knife and cut a very generic looking crown into the top. I didn't look up any reference photos. I was just trying to have fun and play with the clay. I wasn't going for any kind of realism, so I just cut a generic crown out, and then I added some little rivet looking points with one of the pointed tools. And now for the tough part, I need to pull it off of the mat and then turn it into a circular shape, because you know a crown is circular. And one thing I realized about this clay is that it feels very floppy, but it holds its shape very well. It's a little bit like working with silly putty, if you've ever played with silly putty. But once you get it in its shape, it pretty much stays there. It's an interesting texture. It's not like any other polymer clay I've worked with, but it does have its merits. So the thing next to the crown, I just made a little tiny bracelet type looking item with the same rivet type decoration that I had on the crown. And now I've decided to make some gold bars to sit on top of the treasure. So I made a long chunk of clay, and now I'm just cutting from the top at an angle to create what looks like a gold bar. And I do end up creating a couple of these. They're pretty easily recognizable as gold bars, and they'll take up quite a bit of space in the treasure box. So I thought these would be a pretty good idea to make. So I did cover this with some glossy spray. So now it's a shiny block of moldy cheese. But if you do end up seeing any of any part of this through the coins, it will look like it's just more treasure underneath. So now it's time to cover it up with the pieces that actually look good. And these are now all baked and they are very strong. So again, this clay is working well for at least strength. One more thing I wanted to make, I'm using my amazing mold putty, and I made a mold of this little wooden bottle that I had. I wanted to see how this polymer clay works inside of a mold, because it is fun to be able to make one thing and then make a mold of it, and then you can make multiples of them. I've done this with Sculpting, so I wanted to see how it worked with the Arteza brand clay. The trick with this is you have to get it to stick into the mold. It was more interested in sticking to my tool than to the mold, but once I got the first layer of clay sticking into the bottom, I just added a little bit at a time, pushing it down into the mold because I want to make sure it gets every single part inside the mold. Once I got it to stay in there, it seemed to work really well. And the great thing about the amazing mold putty is you can actually bake your clay inside of the mold, so you do not have to take it out and risk ruining it. So while that's baking, I decided to go ahead and start adding some pieces into the treasure chest. So I'm going to start with the goblet, and I'm using again the Gorilla super glue gel. And the reason I like the gel is because it does kind of hold its shape where you put it, and this is going to be easier for sprinkling the coins on the top because they will kind of sit into that glue and it will be held really well. I'm putting a few coins inside of the goblet, and then I'm just going to go slowly adding coins around the outside. I want all these pieces to look as though they are sitting inside of the coins, and so I'm just going to have to slowly build that up. Now be careful with this super glue because it will grab onto your finger and you will have coins glued to yourself. The mold worked really, really well. It even held the texture of that wood, which is really crazy, but it made this little brown bottle. I want it to look like a really old, you know, like those old bottles that are that really dark brown color. That's what I wanted. And so I figured if I could make it in polymer clay, and what I did is I cut it on a diagonal so it looks like it's coming out of the clay at a diagonal. I figured if I could cover it with UV resin, then it would look like glass. So that was my plan. And it worked pretty well, I think. So I just added the UV resin on top of the clay once it had been baked, and then I used the UV light to cure it, and so I have this little glassy looking bottle, and I'm just again going to use super glue to glue it onto the top of the coin base. After that, it's just going to be me moving things around, trying to figure out the best location for all of the little pieces. And I did decide I wanted to use something not polymer clay. I'm going to use some little beads and some wires to create some necklaces. When you think of an overflowing treasure chest, usually you see some little necklaces like falling out of the side. I'm not going to do it a lot, but I did want to add just that little detail. So here you can see me adding some of the super glue, and then I'm just, like I said, just grab a little handful like confetti and then just sprinkle it. And for the crown, I did put some underneath the crown because I wanted it to be angled up a little bit. And I'm just going slowly back and forth, adding an item, adding more coins, and taking my time making sure everything is where I want it to be. And for this little necklace, I just put super glue on the ends, glued it down, and then I just added a little coin on top of wherever it was glued so you couldn't quite tell that it ended. And then I also created one other little piece so it looked like it was coming up out of the coins. And anything you don't want to see, just add a coin on top of it, which is really fun about this project. You can just add pieces and hide pieces. And here's the final look. As you can see, it looks a little funny out of the chest because that necklace is sticking out. but it is nice that I can remove it if I want to use that chest for something else. I'm going to use polyacrylic on top of it to give everything a really nice shine, and the metallic gold does shine a little bit, but I wanted it to really shine because this is supposed to be treasure, right? So I'm just going to add it carefully on top of all the pieces except for the goblet. I decided I wanted it to stay looking like the very matte pewter metal type thing. But on the rest of the silver coins I did add the polyacrylic, and I think it just made everything really shiny, and I think it looks good. It was really fun to create. Most of these things I probably still would have tried to make out of paper if I hadn't challenged myself with polymer clay today. But you guys will have to let me know what you think of the pieces and what else you would add to your treasure. Maybe your treasure isn't so literal, because this is a prompt video. That means you guys get to participate if you want to, and so you could take it literally like I did, actual treasure, like in a treasure chest, or you could make something else that you find to be your treasure. So my final thoughts on the clay is that it's a little bit tough to work with in the beginning, but at the end you get a really sturdy clay baked miniature. So I think it definitely has its uses, and so if you're looking for something really strong, this could be something that works for you. If you're looking for something that's really soft and easy to work with in the beginning, this may not be for you. If you're looking for something for a child, I think that this could be a good kit because it has some safe tools, but it also has enough tools that you could really do some cool things. And of course it has a ton of colors, so any child would be excited to see a lot of those colors, plus it has the jewelry bits, so it could be a really cool starter kit for a kid. Just know it's really tough to get it started, so you will have to be willing to help them get it kneaded in the beginning. Also, I like the little carrier kit. I think it's really cute. As far as the tools go, obviously I didn't get to test them all, but the ones that I used I really liked. I did go through and pull on all of the metal wood pieces because I have had some in the past, not Arteza brand, but other brands from craft stores where the metal pieces have come out, and none of those seem to be loose in any way. So I think they're well constructed, and if you do not have any sculpting tools at all, this could be a good deal for you to get quite a few all at once. And again, I really did like this little metal piece. That's going to be something I think I'm going to use a lot. So that's it for this little treasure chest build out of polymer clay. It was really fun. It turned out really cute, and my daughter has already claimed it. It's no longer mine, apparently. If you're interested in any of these products, I will leave the links down below in the description, and also a coupon code from Arteza. And thank you to Arteza for sending me these items to try out. Now we're to my favorite part of the video, where I get to show everybody what you guys made. But if you would like to participate in prompt number 6, treasure, please tag me on Instagram with hashtag Bentley House Prompts, or send me a message on my Facebook page, Bentley House Minis. Prompt number 5 was water. So Daniela made this adorable little fish tank. You can find her Instagram and YouTube channel. She does lots of different stuff with polymer clay. Nira's Artistry did this little fish inside of a bag, and she has a tutorial on her channel on how to do this. You can see her information in the description box below. And Charlotte is continuing her amazing streak of doing every prompt with this lovely water feature. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope if you haven't already, you would consider subscribing to the channel. I will see you guys in next week's video. Bye!